How's everyone?
I'm back, baby.
It's Jake Ciely.
I'm great. Everybody else sucks.
Oh,
no. It's every nightmare I've ever had.
Excuse me?
It's time to check the link.
Pretty crazy, huh? But it doesn't matter because none of this has anything to do with the show.
You know what? You just made the list.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
It's all in football.
Sure, we talk about it all the time. Really? No.
What is up, you ducks? It's All in Football on FTN. Say hello to my co-host for today, Jeff Ratcliffe, for the last time for this season because he's doing the flagship show for FTN.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
No. So, but it's the last show, correct? This is the last show you're joining me for?
Last show of the off season, Jakey. We'll maybe make some, guest appearances here or there.
Guest appearances. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, okay. So over at FTN, your draft kit is out. As you can see at the bottom, code ALLIN 20% off. Make sure you get, because what we're talking about today. Talking about Jeff's tiers. We're going to go through a couple of questions I have for him. Some off-season talk. I think we have to start immediately, by the way, with the Julio Jones news. Julio Jones is in your tier 1, right? Right? He's with Tom Brady. Bump out Devontae Adams. Just put in Julio Jones. So we got a couple things yesterday, Jeff. We got Chris Godwin. Possibly doesn't start in the pup. Ready for week 1. Not just is he questionable. Ready for week 1 is the report as of yesterday. Julio Jones signs. The Russell Gage up in flames. Everything. How are you breaking out the news from yesterday, which also kind of glossed over a few days ago? Before that was Kyle Rudolph coming in and kind of ruining the Cameron Brate excitement. Like, a lot of things going on for Tom Brady in that offense right now.
Well, a lot to unpack there. So Rick Stroud, who covers the team for the Tampa Bay Times, did put out that that Kyle Rudolph was going to assume Rob Gronkowski's role in the offense. Now, fantasy folks do this all the time. They assume that when a beat writer says something, that beat writer is talking to them. The beat writer is talking about football. Kyle Rudolph is going to play in line in that offense. No doubt in my mind. Cameron Brate is going to continue to be more of a move option. No doubt in my mind. It does not mean that Rob Gronkowski's targets are going to go to Kyle Rudolph. Rob Gronkowski is one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, and Kyle Rudolph is a blocking tight end. Now, he's had a long career, but he's a blocking tight end. So, of course, he's going to play that role. I actually don't mind Cameron Brate if you're drafting him as like your last tight end, or if you're in one of these deeper leagues like Scott Fishbowl. I drafted him as my second tight end in that league. Okay, cool. As for Julio Jones' presence really for me does one thing. It solidifies Russell Gage is nothing more than a number 4. Now, Julio Jones may not stay on the field. We know that, but we kind of had a miscast wide receiver group. We had Mike Evans. Okay, fine. We know what he does. X receiver outside the numbers. Chris Godwin. What does he do best? In the slot. Russell Gage. What does he do best? In the slot. Can't have 2 slot receivers. Needed another outside the numbers guy. So honestly, I think if Tampa Bay gets what AJ Green has been for Arizona, like AJ Green is not peak career AJ Green. He's not fantasy relevant AJ Green, but he's been a number 3 receiver for them. He's right. Doing his job. If they get that, this signing is brilliant, I think. Now, of course, late career Julio Jones could be hurt, and that's a different story. But, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is mostly it takes the wind out of Russell Gage sails.
Yeah, so I think that's a great comparison with Julio Jones. Somebody yesterday tweeted after I updated my ranks and projections for Julio Jones, and they said, talk me off the Julio Jones ledge. I said, real easy. He's not inside my top 50 wide receivers. Like, there you go. Done. Talked you off the ledge.
Well, I was up in the Scott Fishbowl. So my draft, and some people were like, how are you still drafting? We had our live draft last weekend. So we drafted 10 rounds
and then
in that, or 2 weekends ago. And it's been slow ever since. So it's been like a week and a half of slow draft now. And of course I was up when the news broke in the 17th round. So clicks Julio Jones right away. Cause who cares in the 17th round? I'll take the risk.
So for everybody out there, if you sign up at FTN and get Jeff's draft kit, you get his PDF of the tiers. And interesting, what I like what you did with the tiers, it's not just tier of like, here's my break, here's my break, here's my break. You did your tiers also with the rounds that they should go. So you have Russell Gage, you had initially rounds 10 to 12 with guys like Tyler Boyd, Robert Woods, Dotson, and Jacoby Myers. For you, does he now fall out of that? And if you put Julio Jones in a tier, would he slide into that tier, or would you kind of put them both into rounds 13 plus?
Yeah, he's going to slide out of that. That's an ugly tier, isn't it? That's a tier
Yeah.
where you're not drafting wide receivers. There's like no ceiling in any of these guys. Tyler Boyd, great back end wide receiver 3 last year, but he was startable in what, like 2 or 3 weeks? That's it. So yeah, he's going to slide outside of that. I mean, Russell Gage will be a number 4 for me on that roster, and that means there's just simply not enough targets. Like, people are forgetting Leonard Fournette had over 80 targets last year in this offense. That eats up a big chunk. Even if Tom Brady does throw 700 plus times again, that starts to eat into all
I
those
see what
targets.
you did. Eat up a big chunk, Leonard Fournette. Yes.
I mean, I'm going to let people keep believing that narrative so that Leonard Fournette falls to the 3rd round, which is just, it's asinine.
Hold on, Jeff. You usually do the rants on narratives. I already tweeted this earlier today. Speaking of, I have a mini rant for today. I don't give 2 blanks about running with the ones. Guess what, everybody? The only way to evaluate a player is to have him run with the ones. That doesn't mean he is going to run with the ones. Your only concern that you should be watching for is if nobody is running with the ones at all, like rookies, not even getting a chance. Free agents already running with the 2s. And that's what matters, is like that they're not even getting the chance. Of course, you're going to get evaluated and not evaluated with the 3s to know if you're any good. So stop with the Ramondre Stevenson was running with the 1s. He's the running back in the Patriots. Shut up.
I mean, I'll take Damian Harris now instead of in the 7th round, in the 9th round.
I'll take him in. Yes, I'll take all the Damian Harris. That one gets me every single year. That's what, Jeff. That's the rant. That's mine every single year with the running with the ones. And then everybody like tweets at me too. Like if it's somebody that I disagree, like already had a take on, they're like, "Oh, Ramondre Stevenson's running with the ones, Jake."
I don't understand what that does too. By the way, like, does that person sleep better at night? Like there's no such thing as winning a fantasy football argument. It's just a waste of time. I love when people disagree with me, especially if I'm in the same leagues with them, because then I can use that information against them. Not, haha, you lost an argument. Like, haha, I just beat your ass this week. Like that's more important to me than winning a silly argument. I don't get that. Maybe it has to do with the internet muscle people. Like, I get behind a keyboard and now all of a sudden I'm a superhero, and I'd never say it to your face, but I will say it behind a screen. I don't know. I don't get that. But yeah, that's stupid.
I was saying in Instagram DMs.
I don't use Instagram as much as I probably should, but I know people are sliding into those DMs for sure.
I slide into all of them. I don't sleep well anyway. I'm on my like 20th attempted mattress here, by the way, doing the bed in the boxes. So I'll eventually sleep well. Yeah, I know. I've been trying. I've gone through like basically every website you see out there with the bed in the boxes. I think I've tried just about everyone in existence. I'm trying there. Oh, by the way, this is Console Wars, as like Star Wars. That's why the Xbox and the Nintendo's down here and the PS and all that. So that's what this shirt is for today. But let's talk about your tiers. Let's continue with this, Jeff. The first question I have for you, because I see this as a bit of a divisive situation for people out there that like Stephon Diggs and think last year was a big disappointment, and that Davante Adams is potentially headed towards a disappointed on draft cost. You still have Davante Adams in round 1 tier. You have Stephon Diggs in round 2. Is that a slim gap for you, or are you think it's legitimate? I mean, you have round 1 and 2, so I mean, you could say round 1, 11th pick, and round 2, 2nd pick of the round 2 part. But there's people out there who are putting Diggs over Adams because of there's too many touches and it's going to Derek Carr. Where are you on this Diggs versus Adams argument?
I mean, so I actually have a better version of tiers over at ftnfantasy.com, where I just break them up in a traditional sense, and they're in the same tier. So top tier for me is Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Diggs, the reason why Adams slid into the back end of the first round is because I have seen him go at about 12, give or take, and then Diggs at 13, basically when I've been messing around with my drafts. But to me, they're in the same tier. Now, if anybody thought that last year was a disappointment with Stephon Diggs, I don't know how to please that type of person. The dude had his first double-digit touchdown season of his career. He had triple-digit catches yet again. I don't know what to do there. As far as Davante Adams, let people think that. Let him fall to the middle of the 2nd round. Derek Carr is going to force feed him the football. He's still the best wide receiver in the NFL. Pound for pound, best route runner, gets off the line better than anybody out there, makes plays better than anybody out there, knows how to create separation better than anybody out there. So I'm not worried whatsoever. And especially in an offense where you do, in theory, have a smart offensive mind calling the shots in Hoodie McJr., it should all come up really well for Devontae Adams this season. So, no, I'm not worried here at all.
Okay. Well, then, so I'll do this. Hey, look, live for everybody. I just clicked on FTN. Where do I go to find your tiers, Jeff, for everybody out there?
So there's a stupid-looking caricature of me that makes me look like I'm 12 years old. You click on that. If you scroll
on
down.
FTN Fantasy?
Yeah. So you scroll down, and then you click on that thing. And then I don't know why it takes you to the next page, but it says see Jeff Ratcliffe's content. And then there's all the goods. The tiers articles are free for anybody out there who wants to see what we have to offer and doesn't have a subscription. It's a great way to kind of get a taste of things. But, there's always better stuff behind the paywall, or else there'd be no paywall, no sense for the paywall. So behind the paywall, not only do you get the tiers that Jake is talking about are on the first page of each section of the draft guide. And it's really just a kind of loose way of organizing the players in that position and kind of where you could expect them to go by round. But if you wanted, maybe a slightly different look at that, then we have the tiers articles out there as well.
Okay. So I'm going to jump way down your tiers here. I'm going to jump down to tier B5. It is called No Upside City. Jeff?
Yeah.
Do you know who I want to talk about in No Upside City?
It could be a bunch of them, but probably the player at the top, Michael Thomas.
Yeah, because as we're recording today, look at Michael Thomas running routes. It's film time. It's at practices, and people are watching. And look, he just ran a nice little route and looks healthy and all that type of stuff. So if you see, I know you're not doing any reaction, so as I said all that tongue-in-cheek, everybody out there probably knows that. But let's say you see 2 more weeks of Michael Thomas. No setbacks, no coming off the field, no red shirt jerseys on the sidelines, blah, blah, blah. 2 weeks of Michael Thomas practicing. Can he get out of your no upside city, in your opinion?
It's tough because so I subdivide tiers because players, I know I've kind of blown some people's minds out there, but I do not advise people to draft with rankings because what happens with rankings, Jake, is they're a crutch. And last year I had somebody say this to me. They said in about week 4, they said, why, or should I drop A.J. Dillon 4? And my response wasn't yes or no. It was, why did you draft A.J. Dillon? And there were 2 reasons to draft A.J. Dillon last year, right? First reason was you were cuffing Aaron Jones. Second reason was you were trying to catch lightning in a bottle with A.J. Dillon in case Aaron Jones got hurt, right? If you didn't roster Aaron Jones. That's what you were trying to do. His response was neither of those 2 things. It was because he was ranked highest. Now, that's a truth. It was the truth. He was the ranked highest on his board at the time when he was drafting, but that's not a reason to draft a player. And rankings do not tell us certain things. They don't tell us the difference between players who might be back to back. Some guys may be higher. They may have upside, like I said, or maybe they have no upside. So I subdivided. Now, for him to move up out of this tier, he would have to move into tier 4B, which would be wide receiver 2s with high floors. Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle. I just don't see him matching that group. So I don't think he's actually going to move from this tier if we get an indication that he is actually going to be good to go. He just doesn't have upside, and I'm really worried about how he meshes with a traditionally high air yards quarterback in Jameis Winston. Thomas is not a high air yards guy.
No, and the interesting thing here is, so let's stick with the Saints real quick, and not so much for the tiers argument, but to break down this team, is because they drafted Chris Olave, which at the time, as soon as the draft was done, everybody's like, ooh, Chris Olave, great landing spot, already the number 2. But then they signed Jarvis Landry, and if you're looking at Olave's game and Thomas's game and Landry's game, there aren't a lot of air yard type wide receivers among them because that's not their game. I think of any of them, Olave has the highest, but that's not Olave's true game. He's kind of more, I compared him a little bit to like Elijah Moore. It's like, yeah, he can do some of that stuff downfield, but that's not like his game is not Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway. So do any of these wide receivers, because of the addition of Jarvis Landry, who I see in yours is down, you also in the other tier description as an aging vets, that you don't want them type of situation. Like, are we just drafting Olave for the pure upside and understanding that he just might be a bench option all year long that we might eventually drop in week 6 because nothing's breaking out, and this is potentially just a gross passing game that we have no interest in?
Well, I mean, I will agree that, he is the target of this group. And I think you kind of pinpoint a reason why we draft. So often, and this is a common mistake I see a lot of people make when just conceptualizing their fantasy rosters. They will think in terms of starters and bench. And that is a really problematic way of viewing things, because this is not you're not drafting a backup quarterback. You're drafting a second quarterback if you drafted 2. You're not drafting a backup. This is not, Carson Wentz and then Nick Foles comes in and wins the Super Bowl. Like, it's not a backup situation so much so as it's a second quarterback. So when you're drafting wide receivers for your bench, you're not drafting bench players. You're drafting guys who have the potential to hit darn home runs. And you're not going to get that with Jarvis, but you could get it with Olave. And yeah, you're right. If it doesn't work, honestly, I think we'll have an indication. About 6 to 8 weeks is usually what I like to give those players. I don't want to give them 3 weeks because you don't know anything coming out of September. But coming out of October, you do. And that's about 7 weeks into the season, right? So if we don't see it by then, yeah, you cut them, you move on. And usually for a lot of folks, that's a long time. Right now it's easy to say 6, 7 weeks. When we get into week 1, people are no longer thinking 6, 7 weeks anymore. They are thinking right now, right this second. And we have to take that longer view when we draft a player like Olave.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, because you went further on my point that I was making, which short version of it, and you went into, I say that every single year, is like the ones I always reference is why I love Greg Jennings, by the way, who has one of the best Madden highlights of all time with that one game where the guy, he blew his leg on it.
This guy broke his leg. Greg Jennings.
But it was the Greg Jennings, and then I said the Frank Gores is like, stop drafting guys for your bench. You can find those with more upside on waiver wires every single week. Like what I always say, Jeff, is if the thought process when you're drafting on draft day is, I can use this guy during my bye, don't draft him. If that thought comes into your head, stop. You're drafting somebody else.
Stop thinking about bye weeks in general.
What you just said, Jeff, is your thought should be, I see a path, whatever narrative you want to create. If you disagree with Jeff and I, and you think there's a narrative to blank player, what narrative do you have there that says this player could be a top 20 running back, a top 20 wide receiver, a top 10 quarterback? If you see that, that's who you draft, because those Frank Gores and Jennings and Jarvis Landrys and Jacoby Myers, they're going to be on the waiver wire every single week.
Very true. 100%. All right.
Let's scroll back up your ranks. So I have an interesting one here for you, because I'm going to tie in 2. You have one of them is in tier 3B, wide receiver 1s with slight question marks. Then you have to go down a little bit, and you go down back to 5A, which is Upside City. It's DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown. Just had this debate on the Athletics show. I was actually out of the debate. I was the one that voted on the debate between Beller and Funston. But the original debate was Elijah Moore versus DeVonta Smith. Funston and I are team Elijah Moore in that debate, because A.J. Brown comes in definitively the number 1. There's a world where Elijah Moore is still the number 1. Worst case scenario, he is the number 2, just like DeVonta Smith is the number 2. The biggest differentiator we have, Jeff, is that the passing attempts is going to be much higher with the Jets. I say all that to say this. Is there a world, and you don't have them this way, so I kind of want to spin it in what you don't believe, but to say, like, is there a world to DeVonta Smith even having more upside? Is there a world where they finish 5 spots apart from each other instead of 15, 20 spots? Is there a world where it's that close and maybe the share is pretty equal all year long?
I think that world would be a world where A.J. Brown scores 3 touchdowns or something like that. I mean, that's going to be the differentiator. The targets are certainly going to go his direction first and foremost. Let's be clear about Smith. Smith had a pretty good rookie season. Now, I know it wasn't Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, etc., but he had 916 receiving yards. There was a point when we, I'm sure like all of us starting basically around 2010 in the industry, when we started in the industry, if you had a rookie receiver put up 916 yards, that's pretty awesome. Like, not a lot of rookies would get there, and now it was just overshadowed, obviously, by last year. So he's a solid player, but I just think that there's just too much of separation. Howie Roseman even acknowledging this, Eagles general manager, like, we weren't drafting them very well, but we now, we now got our guy. We figured out a different way to do this. He's their guy. Smith is the number 2 and probably very well cast as the number 2, but I think it would take an outlier, very low efficiency year for A.J. Brown for that to happen.
Okay. Let's jump over to running backs. And I'm going to hit tier 4A sexy RB2s with RB1 potential. And there's 2 in this group I want to talk about with you. The first is the first on the list in Cam Akers. This has been interesting because everything was glowing, including myself, because I sat here. I don't know if I made the argument with you, Jeff, or if it was Chris. I think it was with you because we were on the same page. If I'm wrong, correct me. But sat here and said, yeah, it was, because we both sit here and preach and we talk about the fact of what did the teams tell you. Listen or watch what the teams tell you. What the Rams told us is coming off an Achilles from 6 months with the playoffs and Super Bowl on the line. Cam Akers is their bell cow. That's what they told us. And that's why I'm team Cam Akers. And like, Cam Akers has RB1 potential all over again because I want the bell cow on the Rams all the time. Just from the top. Even if Sony Michel was putting up top 15 numbers with the Rams. That being said, Jeff, all of a sudden in the past 2 or 3 weeks, mostly the past 2 weeks, there's been multiple doctor reports throwing out, yeah, but it's Achilles. Yeah, but he might not ever get back to 100%. Yeah, this. Yeah, but. And I'm like, where did this come from? We just sat here saying he came back from an ungodly amount of time. He's got an entire extra year of layoff now. And we're sitting here, I say we, the fantasy world, is sitting here saying, oh, look, James Robinson, he might be back for week 1, and he had a longer layoff than Cam Akers. Maybe Etienne is a threat with James Robinson, but we're all why are we pushing back on Cam Akers all of a sudden? Tell me, Jeff. Is there a reason for this?
I think it's been a consistent pushback, and it's just that one's a classic one in fantasy football. Remember way back when it was the tight end was defined by Jimmy Graham and Rob Gronkowski, and people would make an argument, Jimmy Graham is injury prone, and then it's like, wait, Gronk isn't? what happened here? That was a common one way back in the day. So let's make narratives to fit the narratives that we're trying to push. There's somebody out there who started banging an efficiency drum on Cam Akers maybe as far back as March, and they've continued to bang that drum, and it's been amplified in the echo chamber of social media. But by the same token, here's how concerned the Rams are. They drafted arguably the least athletic running back in the entire class, who is now hurt. They have a constantly hurt running back in Darrell Henderson. And by the way, that was Kyron Williams, who I was talking about. And then they have a guy who is an incredible athlete, but is still very green as a running back in Jake Funk. In other words, they have Darrell Henderson, who's going to inevitably get hurt. What else do we need to be told here? What else? I don't know. So, yeah, I just don't get it. He's going in the late 3rd round right now in sleeper ADP. His ADP is 312, which is crazy. And people are going to get a steal on him.
I did a mock draft with some people for their podcast, and it's rare. You know this. I've said it on many podcasts. I am get my bell cow running backs. I want 2 in the first 3 rounds most every time, if possible. Cam Akers fell to the middle of the 3rd. I was the 8th pick, and I said, I'll start 3 straight running backs. If I'm going to plug in Cam Akers into my flex, thank you. I will take this league and walk home because thank you for that. So you just mentioned there's a concern. This is where I'm going to go to the complete bottom of this tier, J.K. Dobbins. And maybe you want to move him. I don't know. But this is why I want to bring him up because this is different. Now there's talk of not ready for week 1. Gus Edwards. Also, maybe not ready for week 1. And what this team did is brought in Mike Davis and Corey Clement. Now, from a talent disparity standpoint, neither of them, in my opinion, I think most people's opinion, hold a candle to J.K. Dobbins. However, when you bring in not 1 but 2, and you draft Tyler Batty, and you have options that were still on this team anyway, are you starting to get concerned about J.K. Dobbins now at this point?
Well, I've had concerns with J.K. Dobbins. I certainly have.
Enough to bump him out of this tier.
He's still going to be a sexy. As of right now, he's not going to go in the middle rounds, which is the next kind of group of guys. So no, I think I'm going to keep him in this tier. This tier is massive. So there's 5 in tier A, tier 4A, tier 4B has 5, and then Kamara kind of sits in this nebulous place right now until next week when we get his initial hearing. So, there's a lot of backs in that range, and he's really at the bottom of all that group. So I'm not going to move him. As of right now, he went out. He told Ian Rappaport, he told him he was going to be on the field.
Dunked on him.
Now, yeah. week 1 is still a ways away. And if you start camp on the pup, you can come off at any point. I mean, heck, everybody was freaking out for 5 minutes about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's done. Michael Thomas. That's done.
Daniel Bellinger, the rookie tight end for the Giants. Done.
It happens quickly. So, no, I mean, I'm going to keep him here for right now. The good news is most of us, unless you have an early August draft like the Flex League draft, most of us aren't drafting until the latter part of August, if not even early September. And I think we're going to have a much better indication. Like, Jake, if it's August 15th and J.K. Dobbins is still on PUP, all right, yeah, time to panic a little bit. And we definitely got to move him down.
So I'm glad, you transitioned so perfectly for me. I was going to bring up Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who starts in Tier 5A, the Tier 5, which is also, this one's even bigger because between Tier 5A, 5B, and 5C, I'd say it looks like 6, if I estimated off the top of my head, like 6 or 7 more running backs total than in Tier 4. But anyway, point being, you can guys, everybody go to FTN, check it out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Let's talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's funny. I don't think anybody's at the middle ground in Edwards-Helaire, although it kind of feels by your rankings you might be. It feels like people are like, draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's going to be the top 20 running back we hoped he would be because Ronald Jones stinks. And then you have the other camp, which is like, well, we saw Ronald Jones do okay. Clyde Edwards-Helaire stinks and can't run at the goal line, so it's going to actually be Ronald Jones' job, and you're drafting the wrong Kansas City Chiefs running back, Jeff. Break this down for everybody out there.
Okay, I don't want to speak in absolutes because I think that's silly and it does the drafters a disservice. If I was going to say he's going to be a top 20, I'm not ranking him as a top 20, so now I'm not a man of my word. Right?
Time out, Jeff. You mean you're absolutely every single year ranking going down the list? That's not how they're going to 100% finish?
Yes, that's it. Projections are precisely exactly the amount that I think they're.
Oh, yes. When I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire scoring 4.7 touchdowns, he's going to find a way to score that 7th of a touchdown.
That you can score 0.7 touchdowns. Guys, that means 70%. 0.7 means 70%, guys. Anyway, no, I mean, here's the thing about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If you are looking to draft running backs in the middle rounds, you do want running backs like Clyde Edwards-Helaire who come with a host of questions. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't go in the middle rounds, right? But you also want somebody like Clyde Edwards-Helaire who could be positioned to be the lead back in a potent offense who then can give you return on investment. Likewise, like Miles Sanders is another one in that range. We talked Damian Harris earlier. There are other guys as well who will fall into this sort of category. The extreme example, Josh Jacobs fell in my Scott Fishbowl draft into this range, and I was like, okay, fine. If you guys are going to give him to me, I'll take him. But I wouldn't take Josh Jacobs in the 3rd round. I wouldn't take Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 3rd or 4th round. What are you smoking? But Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 6th or 7th round, yes, absolutely. It's just, your expectations for players have to match where you're taking them. And then you have to stay reasonable. I know that's hard for a lot of people, but you have to stay reasonable with those expectations. So in this offense, I just don't believe in Ronald Jones. He's like the Jordan Howard 2.0. No matter what he does, people are going to love him to death. And I don't get it. And I'm never going to get it. And there even was that report. Well, it wasn't really a report. It was a speculation by a blogger, I guess, that Jones wouldn't make the team. I mean, that I think isn't likely, but it is within the realm of possibility. Whereas Clyde Edwards-Helaire not making the team is not going to happen. He is making this roster without a doubt. So I'm going to go with that guy.
All right. So I'm going to read off a game log for you. And I want to put this out there for everybody. 19 carries, 17, 9 banged up, 18, 18, 8, and kind of a weird game, 27, 27, 22, 21, 21, 27, 17, championship game 11. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff?
Is it Leonard Fournette? I don't know.
It's Elijah Mitchell.
Oh, Elijah Mitchell.
Last year at this time, I've said this on many podcasts.
I thought you were doing 2020 Fournette. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. People are probably tired of me saying this. Everybody banging the table. Raheem Mostert, league winner, because he's under Shanahan. Look at what he did when he had the lead role. He goes down. Jeff Wilson, league winner. He's going to be able to do it under Shanahan because we've seen little glimpses of Jeff Wilson before. Then Elijah Mitchell goes out there and does it. And now, nobody wants Elijah Mitchell. Nobody. You know what those carry volume numbers are similar to? Derrick effing Henry. So why are people scared of Elijah Mitchell?
I think the injury concerns. There's something about the nature of that outside zone, and it's a combination of the outside zone and the fact that Shanahan tends to use these undersized backs. Like, it's not like Mitchell is small, but he's not. He doesn't go 225. Like, he's more like 200 pounds. So that creates that situation of some volatility. The fact that they did use a third-round pick on another running back this year, the fact that Wilson is still on the roster, that there have been some reports that we may see more of a true committee with 3 or possibly 4. I mean, Shanahan was out there yesterday talking about Trey Sermon in a positive way. So we can see 3 or 4 backs used in this backfield. I think that might be part of it. He also has some limited appeal in the passing game, but, unsexy for me, that's not necessarily a bad thing with this tier name, by the way. Unsexy to me just means you don't get oohs and ahs, nice pick, bro, when you put the sticker on the board. But I don't really go for that on draft day. I go for the best possible picks. And I do like Mitchell. If he's in the 6th round, he's actually my pick out of that group of like Sanders and Damian Harris and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's at the top of that group.
Well, philosophical question here when it comes down to drafting, and I'll spin it this way for you too, Jeff. Would you rather have a running back averaging 14.1 points per game who only plays 11, or would you rather have a running back get 10.1s per game but plays all 17?
Yeah, that's tough. When are the 11? Are the misses in December?
You don't get to pick and choose that. So for reference here, 14.1 was Elijah Mitchell.
I'm going to go after the banger, the higher scorer.
Yeah, he was 12th in points per game last year, in front of David Montgomery, David Harris, and Aaron Jones. For those 10.1s, Darrell Williams and A.J. Dillon last year. I'd rather, even if you told me I had to figure out come playoff time, I'll take the 11. I'll take the 11 because that probably got me into the playoffs versus the 10 points per game trying to carry me through.
Yeah.
So, again, another philosophical question when it comes to drafting. All right, let's go over to quarterbacks. I know we don't talk quarterbacks too much. But I want to ask actually, I thought I saw him pretty low. He is pretty low. So I know, again, tiers, but for me personally, Jeff, I have him a little bit higher. And here's the case I'm going to make. It's Trey Lance. I'm going to stick him with the same team. And you do, for everybody out there, go look at Jeff. It's late round upside options.
So I have him he's at 13 in this group, the late round.
Right.
So it's the reason why I divide it that way is safe and upside. And that's the approach that I advocate for late round in 1 quarterback leagues.
Sure. Yeah. So, again, you breakdowns in every single one of your sections. If you check out the draft kit with the PDFs, breakdowns in every single player. A lot here that Jeff has for you. Here's my argument for Trey Lance. I'm actually going to argue that he's got a good floor and a terrific upside for this reason. This is the comparison I keep making, and I want to see what you feel about it. And you can call me crazy. We're not going to always agree. I keep bringing up Josh Allen's year 2. Josh Allen's year 2, he threw for 3,000 yards and change. Not 3,100 yards, 3,000 yards. Threw for 20 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, ran for 500 change yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. He was QB7 that year. Those numbers also would have finished in front of Derek Carr last year, which I say, is anybody in this world not thinking Trey Lance can't do 707 more rushing yards, pull off on the rushing touchdowns? 9 might be a little bit aggressive. Even 606. You throw 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, that many interceptions, 606. You're still in front of Derek Carr, and you're actually pushing on the heels of the number 8 quarterback last year, right around Jalen Hurts, who had he had 10 rushing touchdowns. And that's why I say Trey Lance, for me, actually has a pretty solid floor because he's not losing the job. They're going to turn to him all year long. So I'm championing Trey Lance for a top 10 quarterback because I think the floor and the ceiling are both great for him. You say late round upside, like he's not in the safe floor options. Is this... Am I put it this way? Am I drinking too much of the Lance Kool-Aid?
No, it's just a reflection of what to expect on draft day. So late round safe guys are guys that we know. They're known commodities. Sometimes refer to these guys as the basic bros of the fantasy world. So Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Matt Ryan, or whatever at the very end there. Those guys, and like your sort of safe plus guys are like Stafford is like safe plus. Why I put Lance as an upside guy, which is where I put Lamar in 2019, right, is because he is not a known commodity. And therefore, he will almost certainly, in a lot of instances, be available in the late rounds, especially in home leagues, because a lot of people drafted him last year with lofty expectations. And, Jake, I'm not going to do that again, right? So he's going to be around in the late rounds. I don't disagree with you. In fact, I have Hurts. I did a bit on the radio show today on Sirius XM that, Jalen Hurts this last year could be Trey Lance this year. If you're a 49ers fan, I would not expect the next coming of Steve Young. Now, if that does happen this year, awesome, right? Tremendous. It's amazing. But he doesn't have to be good on the football field to be good for fantasy purposes. And I think Hurts is a automatic comp. You have one of the higher upside runners, which immediately gives him a nice floor. He has a big arm. He has weapons in that offense. And he doesn't have to throw 35 touchdowns to be really effective. He can throw, like you said, 20-16 like Hurts last year and still be very effective. This might be a little bit dreamy of me, too, to think that he'll fall to like round 10. If he doesn't, then there are other options in that approach. But I'm not disagreeing. It's just more of what drafters should be expecting on draft day is embedded in these tiers.
Okay, let me go one more quarterback. You have 2 QB volatile option streamers, Daniel Jones, Winston, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Davis Mills. I want to ask you one. Everybody's saying Brian Dable, he can work the Josh Allen magic with Daniel Jones. But we've already seen Sterling Shepard, back on the pup you referenced earlier. Wan'Dale Robinson, running with the ones. Jeff, he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver. Look out. It's just kind of a mess of this team, even though I like Saquon Barkley. I don't really love Daniel Jones because I don't think Kenny Galladay is a good fit for him, even with Dable. Sterling Shepard's already out. Kadarius Toney been banged up a lot. We saw the explosiveness in one game. There's a lot there. The question marks at tight end already. Ricky Jones is banged up. Damian Bellinger is a rookie. They brought in Eric Ebron. I just feel like it's so much of a mess that Brian Dable, if he makes Daniel Jones a top 10 quarterback, I made this joke with Joe Brady doing it with Sam Darnold last year, put him straight into the Hall of Fame because this team, receiving wise, is a mess in my opinion. So I say all that to set up this, Jeff. Is there any chance Daniel Jones can get back, because he was in 1 year because of the rushing upside, get back to being a fringe QB1?
I think it's going to be tough, man. I really do. This is a classic, fool us once, fool us twice. This would be fool us 3 times. It's already shame on us for potentially viewing him as a late round upside option last year. It was shame on him 2 years ago, but I can't do it this year. And I will warn people, in Superflex 2 quarterback leagues, he typically goes too early to be a third quarterback and too late to be a second quarterback.
Yeah.
So I would let somebody else go that route. I'm usually waiting until about 24 quarterbacks are off the board to get my third quarterback, so I'm not grabbing him there. And then I'm trying to get 2 better options. I don't need elite options at quarterback in those formats, but 2 better options in my first 2. So I don't see much appeal to Jones, and I think he's the next of the Mariota. Well, Jameis has gotten a starting job back. Trubisky, I don't think he's long for the Pittsburgh starting job. Daniel Jones will be that next guy. He'll be a backup quarterback somewhere after this year, I think, if things continue along this trajectory. Okay.
I'm going to go to tight end. I'm going to make a case, and I'll see if I can get you to change one of your tiers for me. How about that, Jeff? Which you probably won't, but that's why, because we have our own rankings and everything. But I've been making the case for Dalton Schultz in tier 2 with what you have. Same tier 2, but 3. It's 3 for me. You have Kittle, Waller, and Schultz. And if it's mine, I actually go Kittle, Schultz, Waller. And here's why. I'm going to lay it out. This is why I keep saying it for everybody. Schultz is number 2. I think Gallup's a legitimate question to be the number 2, but he's also a legitimate question for week 1, which has people talking about James Washington and Tolbert, who's going to fill the void, blah, blah, blah. I see Schultz in Waller's role of what we've just seen, and who, by the way, just finished this top 3 tight end, in the fact that Waller is now in the role that we thought Schultz was last year with the additional receiving options, because Adams comes in, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Jeff. I'm saying for a lot of people who are on Team Waller, Waller's going to be great. He's going to be open more often. Hunter Renfro's not disappearing from this team. Hunter Renfro is an amazing option for Derek Carr. And yes, he threw for 4,800 yards last year, But it's one of those, does he throw for 4,800 and 30 touchdowns? Then sure, give me Team Waller. But is it maybe 45 and 30? Is it 48 and 23 touchdowns again? So it's slim differences here. I don't even want you to necessarily put Schultz above Waller, but is there anything I said that I could potentially get you to move Schultz up to tier 2?
Well, that would create a problem because that would move Schultz out of the tight end 1 wheelhouse and move him into an area where I'm not drafting. So
okay.
I'm not willing to do that. I do think that drafters are going to draft Waller first, and that's fine. That fourth round is where Kittle and Waller are likely to go, and I'm not looking at a tight end in that range. So Hawkinson, Schultz, I prefer Hawkinson slightly over Schultz because I think he's got a little bit more athleticism, and he's not just a catch and fall down guy like Schultz. But I get the volume argument. If he sees triple digit targets again this year, then sign me up for that. And I've gotten shares of both of them already this year. So yeah, I think 6th round, 7th round is where we really should be keying in on tight ends. And that's where they're likely to go. So no, I'm not going to move him. I put him there for a reason. That's my favorite spot to draft tight ends this year. And he is one of my favorite 3 tight ends to draft.
So one of your favorite 3 tight ends. Is one of the other ones Irv Smith?
Oh, no, in the tight end wheelhouse. Hawkinson, Schultz, Goddard. If I miss on that group, Irv Smith is one of the guys I'll target along with Njoku, Evan Ingram, Gerald
There
Everett.
you go. I want to ask you about Evan Ingram because we've done a lot of Irv Smith, but we haven't really talked much about Evan Ingram. Similar to Schultz, I see a world, and I would say not even a non-zero chance. I'd say 30% chance where Evan Ingram is the number 2 receiving option for this team. That's a world that could happen. And if Trevor Lawrence is the prospect everybody in the world thought Trevor Lawrence was, even the ones who weren't as high as calling him generational still said definitively the number 1 quarterback in that draft class. Unless you know somebody who didn't, which I'd love to know because they might be geniuses if we're all going 2-3 years down the road. Trevor Lawrence still hasn't been what everybody thought he could be. But that being said, if Trevor Lawrence can just even throw 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, 4,228, something like that. Evan Ingram, go back to his rookie season, and yes, Odell Beckham was hurt. Sterling Shepard was hurt. He was the only man left standing, really, for that offense. But we've seen enough from Evan Ingram to say Dalton Schultz, potential upside, I think that's a little lofty, but it wouldn't shock me if that happened, Jeff.
I'd like to know where Mac Jones was on Belichick's board if he had him above Trevor Lawrence and just showing us all. Because Jones is really, really talented, but not to he doesn't have the same. He doesn't pass that eye test that Trevor Lawrence does. But still, I digress. No, Lawrence was the top on the board for I think everybody out there. Evan Ingram is in that realm of player that fantasy folks love to hate. That irrational hatred of a player. He's a tight end, all right? Tight ends don't put up massive numbers. Tight ends most weeks are not good fantasy options unless they score a touchdown. But he's also now in a prime opportunity, prime spot in a historically tight end-friendly offense with a 1-year prove it as well. 1-year deal, that's it. And if you want to stick around for the long haul, you gotta show up here. So, yeah, I think that's very viable. Every year there's going to be 1, maybe 2 guys out of this group of deep names that make that leap up. And now all of a sudden are top 10, top 8 guys at the position. And really he's my favorite of the bunch to do so because he's already done it once, like you said. Granted, it was situational, but we're yet again in another situation. Now, I don't also want to downplay Marvin Jones could still be heavily used because that's kind of the thing that Marvin Jones, when you least expect it, then all of a sudden has a big year. Zay Jones is going to be used enough to annoy us, I think, in this offense. And then we have no clue, absolutely no clue what's going to happen in the backfield as of now because of James Robinson being good to go for camp. So there's a lot of question marks, but I'm still going to take the shot on Ingram. And the best part about those late round tight ends is I feel absolutely no remorse if they don't hit, just cutting them, moving on to the next guy.
And that's the best part about it too, is that you can just cut. And 13th, 14th round, your last pick if you just wait till zero. So I'm going to finish this thing with come back to running backs. I wanted to save him for the end. There's a lot of Zeke talk. You actually, in your rankings article here for your tiers, the picture is of Zeke. There's been a lot of arguments going both ways, Jeff. One being Zeke is on the downside of his career. This is what happens to running backs at this point. There's the positive spin being he was hurt for most of the year, and that's why he wasn't Zeke. And of course, what did we have 3 days ago? Did you see that film? Did you see him cutting? Did you see him cutting between, like, Zeke's looking good, looks like but we'll say this. He does have one interesting thing most other 99.9% of players in the NFL don't have, and that's Jerry Jones trying to validate his ridiculous contract. So, Ezekiel Elliott, more likely you have him in unsexy RB2s with RB1 potential, so you believe he could be an RB1. But here's what I want to ask you, Jeff. If you had to expect one or the other, do you think it's likelier that Ezekiel Elliott finishes an RB1 again, or likelier that Tony Pollard scores more fantasy points than Ezekiel Elliott and the downfall is really here?
That's tricky. That's really tricky. I will say, anybody watching right now, if you see somebody who is entirely too high on a player, I'm going to guess they are doing that to get engagement and get clicks. Yeah, and anybody in the industry, man, I'll say it to anybody's face out there. Like, you guys are doing the rest of us a disservice by doing that. So maybe knock it off and maybe give good analysis instead of what you think, feel, or believe. And here's the analysis that I have on Elliott. Elliott last year did show signs of decline. Yes. It was partially due to the injury. Yes. But you know what? He's also had a massive amount of touches since 2014, which is now 8 years ago. That eventually wears on any running back. I don't care who you are. The Cowboys are aware of this. The Cowboys are also the best team in their division on paper right now. In other words, you make the playoffs. The easiest path to the playoffs is winning your division. Now, it's never easy to get to the playoffs, but that's the easiest way to do it. They win their division, they're in. If you make it to the dance, you have a shot at hoisting the trophy. They want to do that. How do you do that? You don't do that with Ezekiel Elliott hurt in January. You do it with both Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard on the field. You need both of those guys through this season. You keep running backs healthy by managing their reps. So therefore, Tony Pollard is a viable timeshare, as Jake would like to say, back. And this is a 60-40 type backfield. So honestly, I think it may be just slightly more likely that Elliott is outscored by Pollard than he is to finish as an RB1. I think he's an RB2 now, and I don't think that's a knock on Elliott. I think his career has been remarkable.
Yeah, very similarities. There were similarities between James Conner and Ezekiel Elliott last year, touchdown reliant. But if you look at the volume too, it's a similar volume might to expect this year. But if you want to expect the win, if you want great analysis, follow both of us. Obviously, over at The Athletic/Bets TV, get you first free month. Or you could just go click on my rankings and get $1 a month for an entire year. If you're at FTN, use code ALLIN, get 20% off, and you can check out everything we just talked about with Jeff, which, by the way, you said you could check out for free, and get the additional draft kit stuff, which is like pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of great information. So make sure you're following Jeff at Jeff Ratcliffe, SiriusXM show too, everything going on at FTN. Chris Meany, shout out, and we'll be back next Monday. Starts next week, 3 times a week. So we'll see you then.